not just sports. It's also the professor studying autistic children. We know of a case now where a professor takes the children in, they're disabled, studies them, and then sexually abuses them. So universities have kids all over. We weren't thinking about that. So in most states, we don't have universities as mandatory reporters. They should be. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is this huge expansion of summer camps at universities. And I know this because I have a daughter in high school that plays field hockey. So I've supported many universities over the years. And you drop your kid off for 4 days, 2 weeks of camp. And there's no regulation, there's no supervision, and there's no training. And you're literally leaving your kids in the hands of people. I've been lucky. My daughter has not had a problem, but I'm telling you, there are plenty of problems out there, and Jerry Sandusky is just the tip of the iceberg for summer camp abuse. He used the summer camp to abuse Travis again and again and again by being his roommate. So there's an area that we haven't paid any attention to. The press hasn't paid attention to it because it's really under the radar. But universities are not stopping these summer camps, they're making millions. Unbelievable amounts of money. And the coaches won't stop it because they're making tens of thousands of dollars extra a year on their base salary by making all the money they make for the summer camp. So mandatory reporting, all summer camp employees should be trained. All Little League coaches, all coaches should be trained, and coaches should be named as mandatory reporters in every state. We don't have that right now. Our Little League kids, our Pop Warner kids, they're not being protected. So that's one side of it, mandatory reporting. And that's about identifying perpetrators. But how do you empower victims? You let them go to court. And right now, statutes of limitations in the United States, in most states, are shutting down most victims long before they're ready to come forward. It's an artificial deadline, all it is. But in most states, we shut the courthouse doors right before any victim's ready to come forward, and the perpetrators get the secrecy they need. And it's that secrecy that they thrive on, that they were given by the higher-ups at Penn State, at the Citadel, at Syracuse. It's the secrecy. And the only way to break the secrecy is to be able to go to court. So right now we have a legal system that intentionally protects adults and does not protect children. And so I think that's where we need to go.
I agree with Marcy. Usually a victim will come to me. They really don't want money, but I'm a civil lawyer. And they want so much more than money, because money only represents a validation that the abuse was not their fault. They want the system to be corrected. And what we run up against is, whether it's college football, the boys club, the Boston Red Sox, we're going to correct this. We'll stop this from happening. Well, how can you believe these people? They've knowingly let individuals be sexually molested for decades. Knowingly. It's their culture. They were more worried, and they still are, more worried about the almighty dollar than they are for protection of children. So what do? They say, we'll set up these panels, and we're going to change our ways. Well, they're kangaroo courts. There has to be an independent entity that is purely neutral to correct the situation. The only language these institutions right now understand is money, is dollars, monetary penalties. They can't police themselves. What you're talking about, sports, the church, and it really has to start with the victim, and it does start with the victim. Today I read in the Boston Globe, Bob Hewitt has been suspended from the Tennis Hall of Fame for molesting children. A woman came to me a few years ago. I sent her to the Boston Globe, and they ran with it. There really has to be correction from outside. That's my point. Outside the institution. The institution doesn't give a damn about victims. Their goal is to keep the matter a secret. The pedophile tells the child to keep their matter a secret, or you'll be hurt, you'll be penalized, your parents will be penalized. The supervisor knowingly keeps the matter a secret, and the institution keeps the matter a secret. Now, you're not talking about one case. You're talking about hundreds of children molested over 30, 40, 50, 60 years. All of a sudden, they're going to change their colors, and they're going to say, oh, we're going to correct this situation, trust us. You can't trust them. Every victim feels isolated and alone when they come to you. They feel like they're the only ones who were abused by the particular pedophile. And as soon as they can take that weight off their shoulders, and I'm glad to be able to help them, and some of them go public, and the ones who do go public really are doing a great job of spreading the word, because other victims come forward and say, you know, I was sexually molested by that person too. And we all know pedophiles don't stop with one or two victims. They go as long as they can until they're stopped to death or incarceration or infirmity. They just molest them and molest and molest. So there has to be some sort of structure put in place, a truly neutral structure put in place in this country to supervise these entities. Because they don't give a damn about children. They only care about their wallets. How do you explain people, children, innocent children who respect the authority figures, their coach or whoever, being molested for decades while the supervisors turn their backs? And everyone's telling the child to keep it a secret. And another problem we run into with regard to the statute of limitations is every individual, every victim, every survivor can only come forward when they're ready to, with their coping skills. I have individuals who come to me in their 80s. A man came to me earlier this year, he's 87. He says, I've been carrying this around for 81 years. It's time to do something about it. But I couldn't do it earlier because I didn't want my mother to find out. Or I was too drugged up to do anything about it. Or I was drinking too much. Or I was too ashamed. We have to change the culture in this country. Victims are the heroes, not the coach who molests the child, not the manager who molests the child. They're not the heroes. They're pedophiles. They're the lowest of the low. The victims and survivors are the heroes, and that's what has to happen. We have to set up an independent panel in the country that is going to actually be effective and have a proper screening process. It's more than just getting query reports, doing psychological advance. It's supervising, constantly supervising. It was said earlier, and it's so true, wherever children are, there are sexual abusers. And I really think we have to work on the laws so that we set up some sort of system, some sort of neutral organization that cannot be bought off. There cannot be influence from the outside. There cannot be influence by the big dollars from a college such as Penn State, or the dollars from the Boy Scouts, or the dollars from the Boys Club. The list is endless. It has to be made up of people of integrity, and it has to be made up in part of victims, because they truly know how clever and conniving pedophiles are. And if victims are not on that panel, or not in that group to supervise, then that group won't be as effective as it should be. Thank you.
Just to jump off Mitchell's point, I think as a society what we need to do is develop an intense investigation and hatred for child abuse in this country. We still don't have it. People are still not outraged by sexual abuse of children. And let me give you an example. And this example is going to, I hope, dramatize from the bottom up how we treat victims of sexual abuse. Even our institutions like pro sports teams. In 1981, I was teaching about 60 blocks from here in Harlem at Rice High School. I was coaching basketball there at the time. I was transferred to Boston. And I was asked to be the moderator of the football team. Moderator is kind of like a team chaplain, or sort of like that. So all of a sudden I watched this priest who used to hang around the football team, and he went into the locker room and he had a camera and he would take pictures of kids in various stages of undress. And I went to the headmaster and I said, we've got to do something about this priest. No, he's a great guy. He's the third highest ranking member of the Archdiocese of Boston. He's a great advocate for the school. He baptizes all the alumni's kids. He marries all the alum. And unfortunately, I kept my mouth shut after that. Well, about 20 years later, two of those men, the two that I suspected might have been abused by that priest, went public. One of those men, by the way, both were terrific athletes, and they were exceptionally good-looking kids. I say that because we know in this society what good looks does for people. Well, these kids' lives were ruined, even though they were very good-looking kids. Because one of those kids ended up being recruited by the New York Rangers. And because of the anger he had from his prior abuse, the New York Rangers were preparing him to be what? The goon, the enforcer. He was being trained specifically to be the fighter on the team. And that just added to more and more dysfunction and more. So it goes from the bottom to the top, and it's insidious, and it's unhealthy, and it's dysfunctional. And if you'd like a very good dramatization of that, go see the movie Mea Maxima Culpa. It's here in New York now, starting tonight at the Film Forum. I was the liturgical consultant on that film, and I'm actually in the film as the priest saying Mass, by the way. By the way, that traces the cover-up from these little deaf kids in Wisconsin right to the Vatican. On and on and on and on. And that's what happened at Penn State, and that's what happened at Syracuse University, and that's what happened in the Red Sox. It's exactly the same pattern of behavior, and we've got to change that.
Chris, can I make a pitch now? Mea Maxima Culpa, November 28th. It's showing at 2 in the afternoon. We're going to do an event for statute of limitations reform in New York at noon, outside the Film Forum. March Markey, the Assemblywoman who's introduced SOL reform in New York now 7 times, and I'm hoping Bob and Chris are going to be out there and talking to the press about changing the laws for child sex abuse victims. So we can fill up the theater with good people.
Thank you, Marcy.
What was the date again?
Share that information with me, Marcy, and I just want to say to everybody, MaleSurvivor's Facebook page, we will have all that information up on the Facebook page. So facebook.com/MaleSurvivor. So Katherine, you wanted to go.
Well, you know, I wanted to jump in and speak to a lot of the points came up about Safe4Athletes. So what Safe4Athletes has done is we've developed a full policies and procedures that address sexual abuse, bullying, and harassment. We require all our coaches to sign a coach's code of conduct. We do use the United States Olympic Committee's coach's code of conduct. We have a full handbook. It's about 64 pages long, addressing all behavior for accountability. But what we require is that there be an athlete welfare advocate available there. Often what happens is an athlete's family has sacrificed, especially as the more competitive you become, they've sacrificed, the whole family sacrifices for a competitive athlete, whether it's paying the extra for the travel, the equipment, all those other things, and then you put the burden of being sexually abused on that, it makes it very difficult to bring that forward. To take on all of that burden. And then so as a result of Safe4Athletes program, they would have a person to go talk to have a confidential conversation with to help them understand the issue and then to respond accordingly. And we have a full, very clear map of how to go about investigation. And Safe4Athletes also has an 800 number for athletes to call. If they, if they need help. And any club that adopts the Safe4Athletes program or a camp or anything, we will help them work through an issue that arises. But we have very clear boundaries that are identified. And I find that when there isn't, when you're not educated, we educate our athletes, we educate our parents, we educate the coaches. And when you don't have policies and procedures in place, then in a clear way how to investigate and respond to an incident as it arises, then everybody's kind of running around in mayhem. And so that is like the purpose, to not just address the bullying or putting a coach in a position to not get rid of the best kid on the team and not put themselves in a decision-making like that. This is outside of them. When we map this out, what behavior is expected of them and how they are to respond. And I think it's great for both the kids, the team, and as parents, they should be asking, anytime they put their child in a sports environment, if there's policies and procedures in place. What are the background checks that you've done? We require references of all of the coaches, not just 1, 3. If you look at a recent incident about gymnastics, 20 years, was let go, moves to another city, another town, and here, same issue comes up. So in the case of Safe4Athletes, we work at the administrative, well, you guys are lawyers, I'm not, but I'm sure you can correct that, where it's 50% and a feather. It's a more likely than not. And so we would be listing predators that have been deemed to have violated the policy. We would list them on the Safe4Athletes site, what sport, what club, what location they're at during the violation. They may not be on any list anywhere else, but they have a more likely than not to have been a violator. And so, and what that does, we give the athlete a voice with our program, as well as help parents make informed decisions about who they're going to entrust their child to.